हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय चैनल। आज हम करेंगे अर्ली रोमांटिक पोइट्स। ये MEG 1 है, ब्लॉक 6 है एंड यूनिट 27 है। So let us start early romantic poets. Some of the features of romanticism which we discussed above are seen much earlier than 1798 in a number of poets. मतलब इससे पहले भी जो अर्ली रोमांटिक पोइट्स थे उनमें भी ये सेलियंट फीचर जो थे, सम फीचर्स जो थे रोमांटिसिज्म के, वो पाए जाते थे। सबसे पहले पोइट हम पढ़ेंगे जेम्स थॉमसन। जेम्स थॉमसन जिनका जन्म 1700 में हुआ था और 1748 में उनकी डेथ हुई थी। टुक अ डीप इंटरेस्ट इन नेचर। हिज पोएम द सीजन्स, जो कि 1730 में पब्लिश हुई थी, इवोक्स interest in the processes of nature. He is fascinated by the fearful aspects of nature, such as floods and storms. He is described as a poet of pictorial landscape. He speaks of the interactions between man and nature in the seasons. The great variety and beauty of nature move him deeply. The following lines reminds us of Wordsworth. Now the soft hour of walking comes for him who lonely loves to seek the distant hills, and there converse with nature, there to harmonize his heart, and in pathetic song of breathe around the harmony to others. The seasons में से ये ली गई थी। उसके बाद है मार्क, जो सेकंड पोइट हैं, मार्क एकिनसाइड। उनका जन्म 1721 में और 1770 में उनकी डेथ हुई थी। He was another forerunner of Wordsworth. He attempted to revive the Greek forms of the lyric. His most important poem, The Pleasures of Imagination, जो कि 1744 में पब्लिश हुई थी, is at once didactic and descriptive. The poet sees that the beauty and harmony of all nature is shown directly to the purified intellect. तो उसमें से एक पैसेज है द प्लेजर ऑफ इमेजिनेशन में से, वंस मोर सर्च अनडिसमेड द डार्क प्रोफाउंड वेयर नेचर वर्क्स इन सीक्रेट, व्यू द बेड्स ऑफ मिनरल ट्रेजर एंड द एटर्नल वॉल्ट दैट बाउंड्स द होरी ओशन, ट्रेस द फॉर्म्स ऑफ एटम्स मूविंग विद incessant change. Their elemental round, behold the seeds of being, and the energy of life kindling the mass with ever-acting flame. Them to the secrets of the working mind, attentive turn. Now Joseph third हैं, Joseph Wartons 1722 to 1800 उनका लाइफ टाइम रहा है। द एंथुजियास्ट पोएम उन्होंने लिखी है, जो कि 1744 में पब्लिश हुई थी, presents Rousseau's primitive and romantic's love of the antique. It speaks of the communion with nature, the superiority of the noble savage, and the idyllic innocence of the new world. तो ये बोलते हैं, happy the first of man, ere yet confined to smoky cities, who in sheltering groves, warm caves, and deep sunk valleys lived and loved by cares unwounded. उसके बाद है विलियम कॉलिंस। विलियम कॉलिंस का टाइम है 1721 to 1759. William Collins exercised pervasive influence on almost all the romantic poets. He finds that landscape evokes ideas and emotions. He loves nature at twilight. Twilight means sham. His ode to evening is the forerunner of Keats to autumn. Romantic tendencies such as a return to the past and anti-intellectualism may be noticed in his ode on popular superstitions. Coleridge is impressed with Collins' use of superstitions and classical legends. Collins' favorite theme of twilight scene is illustrated in the following lines. Now air is hushed, save where the weak-eyed bat, with short shrill shriek, flits by on leathern wing, or where the beetle winds his small but swollen horn, as oft he rises midst the twilight path. Against the pilgrim born in heedless hum. ओ टू इवनिंग चली गई है ये. फिर थॉमस ग्रेस. थॉमस ग्रेस वेल नोन पोएम एलेजी written in a country churchyard pays attention to nature and humble life which are dear to the romantic poets. तो ये बोलते हैं now folds the glimmering landscape on the sight save where the beetle wheels his droning flight and drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. Gray's later writings sorry Gray's later writings indicate the swing in the taste towards medieval literature and Scandinavian folklore. His letters anticipate the romantics' love of scenery and nature. He records the different moods of nature in charming detail. Such descriptions paved the way for Wordsworth's memorable descriptions of nature. Here is a short piece from Gray. इसको नहीं हम पढ़ेंगे, चलो इसको रीड कर ही लेते हैं. 4 लाइनें हैं. In the evening walked alone down to the lake by the side of Grove Park after sunset and saw the solemn coloring of night draw on, the last gleam of fading away on the hilltops, the deep scene of the waters and the long shadows of the mountains thrown across them till they nearly touched the hithermost shore. At distance heard the murmur of many waterfalls, not audible in the daytime. फिर है विलियम कॉपर. विलियम कॉपर 1731 to 1800. William Cowper is yet another precursor of Romanticism. For him, love of nature and religious worship are related activities. He believes that contemplation in the midst of nature will bestow wisdom more easily than will reading of books. He prefers the beauty of the countryside. He portrays nature in his poem. Cowper also attacks Alexander Pope for his smoothness and advocates the manly rough line. This idea is later developed by Wordsworth. Cowper anticipated the Romantic generation in his political liberalism, in his humanitarianism, and most of all in his sympathetic and faithful rendering of external nature. Contrasting the rural with the urban scene, he wrote, God made the country and man made the town. What wonder then that health and virtue, gift that can alone make sweet the bitter draught, that life holds out to all, should most abound and least be threatened in the fields and groves. ये टास्क से लिया गया है. ओके, नाउ हम करेंगे रॉबर्ट बर्न्स को करते हैं. इनका जन्म जो है 1759 में और इनकी डेथ 1796 में हुई थी. Now Burns is the most beloved poet of the Scots. He is also a symbol of their national spirit. He was interested in a number of things which were later considered essentially romantic tendencies. He was steeped in Scottish folklore. He loved freedom. He respected the common man. He was attracted by nature, swimming against the current in his time. He believed that emotion was a better guide than reason. Now the use of folk song. Scottish patriotism in the 18th century longed for independence and unity. It seized upon any symbol of its uniqueness. Burns went in search of the Scottish ballad tradition, both to oppose and reject the English culture. He is probably the best 18th century example of the influence of folk poetry in the mainstream English poetry. There are two tendencies in Burns' life. पहली थी the cultivated tradition of polite poetry in the 18th century, peasant poetry about peasants among whom he lived. Burns did not believe in any rule of composition. His poetry was strongly influenced by folk poetry. The folk elements in his poetry are folk elements कौन कौन से? पहले तो theme हो गया. The themes are generally death, birth, youth, old age, love and grief. Seasonal activities like harvesting and May dances and seasonal changes like snowfall fall are also used. Settings and dramatic situations are often stylized. Tableaus repeating certain fixed scenes occur in folk poetry. उसके बाद है उनका फॉर्म. द फॉर्म ऑफ फोक पोइट्री इज दैट ऑफ डिबेट, अ सीरीज ऑफ रिडल्स और टेस्ट्स. Birds and flowers are given human qualities. Number 3 is significant. 3 riddles, 3 actions, etc. Now vocabulary. Vocabulary is simple. Many stock phrases are used. Because of oral origins of folk poetry, stock phrases and patterns added the memory of the oral poet. Formal devices such as the refrain impose limits on language in folk poetry and indicate its origin in dance. Now rhyme. The vocabulary is simple. Many stock phrases are used because of the oral origins of folk poetry. अच्छा, ये तो हमने कर लिया, vocabulary हमने कर लिया. अब हम rhyme करेंगे. Rhyme. Folk poetry is not rigid in its use of rhyme as neoclassical poetry was. Assonance, alliteration and internal rhyme are common in this poetry. Observe these poetic devices in the following line of Burns. जैसे कि their wild woods grow and rivers row. There is variety in rhyme schemes. The meter is folk. In folk poetry is flexible. Burns wrote many traditional and also original songs, but he wrote only 3 long poems. There was a moment favoring the short, pointed lyric. Burns wrote a poem entitled "To a Mouse," which is certainly a lowly subject. Writing on such subjects was against the grain of neoclassicism. Another poem, "The Cotter's Saturday Night," shows his interest in the humble people. He had sympathy for the oppressed, sharing the ideals of the French Revolution. He had expressed dangerous sentiments such as the following just before the revolution. जैसे कि जॉली बैगर से लिया गया है. अ फिग फॉर दोज बाय लॉ प्रोटेक्टेड, लिबर्टीज अ ग्लोरियस फीस्ट, कोर्ट्स फॉर कावर्ड्स were erected, churches built to please the priest. Burns expressed strong patriotism for Scotland. He revolted against religious orthodoxy. He satirized Presbyterians and Calvinists' faith in Scotland in his poems. Holy Willie's Prayer and the Holy Fear. He is thus a precursor of the later romantic poets like Shelley, who re-examined religious belief in a more serious way. Now उनकी love poems की बात करेंगे. Burns' greatest poems are his love poems. They are also influenced by folk poetry. Repetition is a poetic device to produce an incensatory effect may be found in "My love is like a red, red rose." Neoclassical poets like Pope avoided repetition for the sake of economy and for the progression of ideas. Another poems of Burns, Ye Flowery Banks, is a lament which presents a negative view of nature. In this girl's song, the traditional rose thorn image is used to indicate loss of chastity. Happy nature is contrasted with the melancholy speaker, and there is a return to the place of former happiness. Burns resorts to suggestion rather than direct statement in this as well as in other poems. These are all intimations of romanticism. The range of Burns' love song is great. He could write of love from his personal experience and from a woman's point of view. He could write of love in old age with equal charm. Male protectiveness appears repetitively in many of his love songs, including A Red, Red Rose. Patriotism is another recurring theme in his songs. So इसमें थोड़ा सा AULD alt LANG lang SYNE sign is called the world's greatest song of human fellowship and friendship. Though Burns' poetry is based on local people and situations, he is not a regional poet in any narrow sense. He stresses the elemental, the universal, and the permanent moods and thoughts in all humanity. He used the real language of man as he found it in the folk literature of his country, and thus showed the path to Wordsworth. His use of lowly subjects and simple diction was a worthwhile example to Wordsworth and through him to other romantic poets. तो हमने इसमें बर्न्स के बारे में पढ़ लिया. अब हम विलियम ब्लेक के बारे में थोड़ा करेंगे, और थोड़ा टाइम है तो हम विलियम ब्लेक भी पढ़ते हैं. इसके लिए विलियम ब्लेक के लिए तो पूरा का पूरा एक यूनिट जो है डेडिकेटेड है. सो यूनिट नहीं बोल सकते, हाँ, विलियम ब्लेक के लिए पूरा यूनिट डेडिकेटेड है और उसका वीडियो मैं ऑलरेडी बना चुकी हूँ. नाउ विलियम ब्लेक का थोड़ा पढ़ते हैं. वी शैल नाउ डिस्कस विलियम ब्लेक बट only briefly because there is a separate unit of him on this block. ये मैंने पहले आपको बता दिया. He was hardly known in his lifetime, but now he has a respectable place among English poets and artists. He was an engraver at a time when that art was losing its popularity. Blake was a man of vision who saw ultimate truth at moments of great illumination. Vision is for him the great secret of life. His entire work, poetry or painting, is an attempt to develop this faculty of vision so that man may see to understand and thereby forgive and act rightly. His Songs of Innocence, जो कि 1789 में publish हुए थे, created through a new process called illuminated printing, are examples of originality. He equated his extreme sense of freedom and happiness to the condition of childhood. In these poems, जो कि Songs of Innocence है, he says that childhood is the original state of happiness, self-enjoyment and unity. In his Songs of Experience, जो कि 1794 में publish हुए थे, he expresses his deep indignation, मतलब hatred at the hypocrisy and cruelty in the world. In the Marriage of Heaven and Hell, he affirms the reintegration of the human soul, divided by innocence and experience through imagination. Blake's poetry and painting are didactic. ना वो कुछ ना कुछ सीख देती हैं उनकी पेंटिंग्स और उनकी पोइट्री. He wanted people to free themselves from conventions and traditions and to depend on their own intuitions to realize their potential. The mystical tone, the symbols, the revolutionary ideas, and the newness of his art made people think that he was a lunatic. He was more revolutionary in themes, diction, and techniques than Burns or Wordsworth, but his genius was not recognized in his lifetime. He carved a place for himself in world literature because he swam against the current by defying reason in an age of reason, and because he gave importance to intuition and imagination in an age of scientific skepticism. तो उनका एक अलग ही एक उनकी जगह थी वर्ल्ड लिटरेचर में. उन्होंने अपने लिए एक बहुत ही अलग जगह बनाई थी क्योंकि जो करंट था ना उसके अगेंस्ट वो फ्लो स्विम कर रहे थे. क्योंकि उस टाइम तो रीज़न पे ज़्यादा बात होती थी, लेकिन वो रीज़न को ज़्यादा ना मान के इंट्यूशन और इमेजिनेशन को ज़्यादा ध्यान उस पर दे रहे थे, उसको ज़्यादा मानते थे. चलो, थैंक यू सो मच. नेक्स्ट वीडियो में विलियम वर्ड्सवर्थ के बारे में थोड़ा पढ़ेंगे और एस टी कॉलरिज के बारे में. थैंक यू. प्लीज़ सब्सक्राइब माई चैनल.